Welcome to the April 26, 2023 CALPADS Q&A. My name is Paul Higgins. I'm a data analyst working at CISA supporting CALPADS. So with that said, moving on to the announcements. As you all know, we are in that quiet before the storm being end of year, which is scheduled to begin on the 8th of May. The CISA trainers have put together the end of year checklist and the roadmap. So as we're getting ready for that May 8th, 2023 kickoff for end of year, you can be loading data into CALPADS beforehand. And as you can see on the screen right now, the end of year milestones, we are in that second area right now. We are, now in that 623. So we're saying make sure that you start uploading your data as early as possible. CDE is continuing to push for shorter windows, deadlines that are quicker, so that way we can report the data sooner, get the data into your hands sooner, get the data into fiscal's hands sooner, actually meet our reporting deadlines with the Department of Ed, Federal Department of Ed. All those things are really good reasons why the windows are shortening, and it doesn't make it any easier. But I would like to think that this group is very proactive and gets on these things as quickly as possible. So, if possible, jump right into that end of year stuff and get your prep work done for the year, please. That will make life easier for everybody. Angela, how are we doing on bugs and builds, etc.?
Thanks, Paul. We did have a deployment yesterday morning. So Alex, if you were to navigate to the footer of CALPADS, find the active and fixed known issues. There you go. And it's up to date with everything that went in yesterday and all current known issues. I think that's all I have for you today, Paul.
Wonderful. Thank you. Marshall, Joe Tan is in the waiting room. Then I'm going to go ahead and get started here. In meeting chat, we have Q1 from Laura at 3:00. And it starts out Q1. We have a few situations where a student was expelled, but was not placed at a new school for some time. My director of students is wondering if we will get an error if we create an administrative decision of expulsion with the date the board agreed to the expulsion, and then not drop the student at a later date due to placement taking a while. Well, if the student was expelled, you have to move them along and get them out of the school. I guess I don't understand why you wouldn't exit them and keep them enrolled. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong here.
Right? How long should the duration be?
Or do you have to worry about them being placed before you can drop them? And that's not the case, right? Once you expel them, that's the date that we need to know when you expelled them, which typically means that's their exit date as well.
We never collect the date of an expulsion. We collect the date of the incident occurrence, but we don't collect the date of the
expulsion,
right? All we collect is the duration. How long did it last? The student remained in school until they could be placed somewhere, but something tells me that when they were expelled, they were
conditionally.
Brandy, she did add some additional information here. She writes, sorry, not dropped till a later date. They are special ed and we need to provide services until a new placement is made.
Okay. I don't know what you mean by dropped, Laura. Did they stop coming to school is what I'm asking. I'm assuming that they were receiving services through home instruction during the period of expulsion. Is that correct? And so what exactly is your question?
Drop equals exit. Tammy clarified what she was saying. Would you need a stay for them to remain while waiting for placement? Have them doing work from home? And Laura said, yes, that is correct, Cami. Did that help, Brandy?
I mean, like I said, if the student is expelled outside of their regular educational setting, then the duration of that expulsion is the number of days they were removed from their regular or least restrictive environment. Okay. I'm assuming that's you won't get an error because again, we do not collect the date that the board agreed to expel. We collect the incident date. Okay. Perfect. She said, I think you answered the question by stating we don't collect expulsion dates.
Perfect. All right, moving on to ASIA's 302 Q1. I am being advised that winter cars deadline hasn't yet been announced. The last cars was completed last year. How does this impact end of year reporting?
Data to generate CERT 97, which is, hey, Title I targeted school, you didn't report any Title I targeted records. So at the point where those data, that collection can be opened and we actually capture the data, it tells CalPADS whether a school is Title I targeted or Title I school-wide. We don't know when that's going to happen. So CDE is right now discussing options for using the prior year's statuses to drive whether or not that validation triggers. But bottom line, folks, is it's not going to hold up your certification. The option that we select is not going to prevent you from certifying. So we will let you know when a final decision is made.
Thank you, Brandy. 303, Lisa, when will the SPED data discrepancy reports become available?
Are we doing that in SPED redesign or has it been put on the back burner for a while?
Well, it's a data discrepancy report. Oh, those data.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a special, go ahead.
The extract is available now, right? Under
Broke when we did file submission.
it did, but it looks like it's there now. I was just checking.
I hope this is what you're talking about. If you're talking about the SPED data discrepancy reports, that's something different.
Called SPED data discrepancy extract.
Yeah, there's that. And then we will have data discrepancy report. Those won't be here until fall for all.
All right. All right. Going on down to 306 and Eileen Chewy Dugan's question. I have two students that appeared on the DC list as reduced that had previously submitted alt income forms qualifying as free. Does the DC trump the alt income form?
For purposes of LCFF, to be really clear, and reporting to CalPADS, you can elect to use either of those things. So in terms of, now if we were actually talking about meal provision, right, and whether or not the kid has to pay for meals or not, then obviously direct cert would be a factor. But for purposes of LCFF, you can use either of those, either the alt form, says are free, or you can use the direct certification results.
Has the frequency of the CCE discrepancy updates in CALPADS anomalies management changed? How soon does the CCE show up? It appears that the CCEs are not being updated as quickly as in the past.
I thought with Faust mission redesign that the anomalies were constantly running throughout the day. Brandy, do you know if that's changed at all?
I have not heard anything different, but that doesn't mean anything.
So our understanding is that it should be updated. Those anomalies should be, the reports maybe not, but the online, you should see the CCE show up pretty much throughout the day.
Looks like there's some conversation below it. Kelly is saying mine clear almost instantly, and May responded with, I had some CCs that did not show up. However, I resolved them, so I don't have a sample. It may just be she was being proactive and stopped the CCEs before the process ran. Just throwing it out there. All right, Melissa at 309 Q1. I was requesting an SSID for a student and I accidentally entered the incorrect start date, type 13 instead of 23. The record got rejected, but an SSID was assigned. I fixed the start date, but now the student has a demographic record with the incorrect start date of 2013, and I cannot delete it. I added a new one with the correct start date, but was wondering if there is a way to remove it, the incorrect one, the 2013 one. Melissa, do me a favor, open up a service desk ticket and I will walk you through that process because it's a matter of having to open up enrollments, do the work, but that aren't, that's not conflicting, and then deleting stuff. And it's just kind of a pain to describe over the phone. And I don't think you'd really retain it all because it is just kind of all conditional. So please give me a service desk ticket and just put my name on it and we'll walk through it together. All right, Wendy at 309. Q1, if a student was found no longer eligible for SPED after an eligibility evaluation was held, can the district exit the student from SPED and end services even though the parent requested the second opinion of an independent evaluator, or should they wait for the results of the IEE provider?
I believe that you can go ahead and send up record indicating the fact that the student was not eligible. If the independent evaluation changes that, you can follow it up with a subsequent record changing their status. You can submit it up as a subsequent annual or a subsequent initial evaluation.
At 311, I am fairly new and was asked about SPED students that come in with a cohort, i.e. 2020/2021, but stay for a fifth year graduating in 2022, or stay through their 22nd birthday and receive their diploma during that time. We cannot update their cohort, so how can we make it so those students don't count against us for our graduation numbers? Well, the cohort is objectively reporting outcomes, and up on the screen, Alex is showing you the 15.2 report. So the 15.1 and 15.2 reports have their specs in the user manual and explain a lot of the cohort processing. And then in our YouTube channel, which don't bother going there right now, we also have, I think it's like a 2-hour-long cohort training that the analysts put together and updated over the years. We haven't updated it this year because nothing changed. But for federal reporting of the cohort, they are either a graduate completer or they are not. Those are your choices. The state of California, as in the 15.2 and 15.1, expanded that out of the binary choice into multiple buckets with multiple decisions inside of each of those buckets. So that way it's much more granular to you, the end user, who could possibly make a difference at the local setting to help students through if you understood where they're all going instead of just, are they a graduate completer? No? Okay, then we don't care. The additional data we provide, or CDE provides, allows you to do your own local analysis to determine whether all your kids are just dropping out and disappearing. Are they going to adult ed? Are they getting GEDs, CHISPs? What are they doing? But so that data is there. So for those SPED students that come in with, you know, any student who comes in is already going to be assigned to a cohort membership group. And that cohort is going to be reported at the end of 4 years. And wherever that student is at the end of 4 years is where they're going to be reported. Now, special ed have their own special bucket, that E230-120, a special ed certificate of completion. So they're still not being reported as graduate completers, but for the state of California, they are getting their own bucket assigned to them to say, hey, we got a bunch of completers over here. Or if you're not assigning certificates of completion, but then immediately moving them into, you know, a 5th year or transitional services, that's going to be recognized in the cohort as well. So if, say, they're just coming back the next year and you exited them as an E at the end of their first 12th grade year, and that's their cohort reporting year, they're going to, and you also put in the next year's enrollment prior to the end of year submission using a date on or before census day of the following year, that student would show as still enrolled. But if they just have that E156 and that's their final terminal exit coding before the end of year window closed, they'd be considered a dropout. So we've already considered what happens with those SPED students. It's just a matter of they need to be reported accurately as to whether or not they're returning, or they have completed, or they are going to continue on and try and get their high school diplomas. Because once they have their high school diploma, they can't go back for transitional services. So, and they shouldn't be using their transitional services enrollment working on a high school diploma. All that to say, it depends. If you have a specific question on a specific student, please send in a service desk ticket and we'll go through this with you again.
And the only caveat all is that if they're enrolled in a DAS school. So if they're enrolled in a DAS school, as long as you've got them marked as an adult age student with disabilities in transition, they will be removed from the denominator of the DAS or 1-year graduation rate. That is, again, different than the 4-year cohort.
Thank you, Brandy. I did not make that clear. You're right. All right. Moving on to Javier, 312 Q1. Going through ERDs, I noticed that a few students were exited with codes and or 100 in the 21-22, but their next enrollment did not appear until the 22-23. Can we still update those even though the student was not enrolled until the following school year? No, don't update those. You exited them for a reason 2 years ago using those codes. And CDE wants to see the E and the E400s when they're doing their analyses, because each one of those is coded specifically to a scenario, and they want to know when those scenarios hit. E140 also requires either a complete investigation as to the student's whereabouts or a SARB hearing. So, and again, CDE needs to know about those things when they're doing their analyses. So at this late date, going back and changing them to T16 doesn't do any benefit, and it actually harms the analyses into the future. So no, do not go back and change them. Cedric, 316 Q1, we have a possible case of an ELAS correction reason code of 1. What constitutes evidence of a non-English primary language?
Okay, so evidence of a non-English primary language. So let's say parent fills out the HLS and it's English, 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 right? So the kid actually gets into the classroom and the teacher finds evidence that there's a non-primary language. Or let's say some of the front office staff notice that their parent comes in and doesn't speak English. It's things like that. So if there's evidence outside of the HLS that the district can provide that indicates that they don't have, their primary language is not English, then they can correct that to a TBD so that they can be tested with the initial LPAC. That's just
Thank you, Brandy.
no problem.
Cedric, moving on to Nettie. 316. We had a SPED Fall 1 cert. Let me start again. We had SPED Fall 1 cert errors and have been making submissions. Is there any way to check which cert errors are still unfixed? That is going to be the purpose of the data discrepancy and the certification data discrepancy reports and user interface that will eventually work its way through the system and out to you when we work all the bugs out, which will effectively be running all of the data discrepancies and certification data discrepancies all the time, all year round. So that way, at any point in time, you could pull it up and go, okay, for Fall 1, I'm going to have some issues, and go and start addressing your SPED data or your homeless data or whatever wasn't lined up. But currently, we don't have that. So right now, I probably could not have certified Fall 1 or LEA approved Fall 1 if you had true fatal errors or native fatal errors that were still triggering. What did we have relaxed for Fall 1? Actually, just tell me, what errors are you asking about, Nettie? Go ahead and reply into your question up there. Write back and answer my question, and I'm going to move on, but we'll come back to your question, okay? Wendy says, thank you, Javier. I see your Q2. Marshall at 3:20 posted the 4-year adjusted cohort YouTube channel link. So that way, if you wanted to go and see the ACGR training that we did, which we are immensely proud of still, it's still there. It's a very good training, and it has aged well so far. Moving on to 321, Vanessa Q1. For students that are pre-enrolled and need to be tested for summer LPAC testing July 15th through 22nd, what date do I use for the enrollment so they can have a test open in TOMS?
So there's a specific window you can, I believe it starts August, June, July, and August. So there's a specific communication. And Gary, are you driving today?
Alex is.
So Alex is trying to find the flash with this, but it basically says that during those specific months, you can submit up an enrollment record with their enrollment start date in the future. And then you would need a TBD record, and the TBD record can be as of today with a primary language other than English. So there's the flash.
I don't know if that was it. I'll try to
Was
find it.
Flash 219 into the
Thank-
chat.
They're quick.
So there you go. So read, and the guidance should still be accurate for this year. All right. Moving on to Christina, 322, Q1, should special ed students that graduate from our high school and receive a high school diploma be coded using the school completion code of 100, even though they are not required to complete the same amount of credits as other students? Well, the E23100 is a graduate completer, which is stating, they have completed all requirements to graduate from high school and to have earned a high school credential. I don't know what you're referencing when you say SPED students don't have to earn the same amount of credits. I will leave that to Brandy and or Joe. But if I see a 100 completion code, I know that they have earned a high school diploma, not an equivalency, not anything else. They have earned a high school diploma. So, Brandy, Joe, do you want to talk about?
Clarify that if you're referring to a certificate of completion, Christina, that's something completely different. It means those students are not in pursuit of a high school diploma. So I'm not really sure what type of diploma you're referring to. As Paul mentioned, if you use E23100, that in general means that the students receive the same diploma as a preponderance of the other high school graduates in the state. If you're talking about a certificate of completion, then that's not the same thing at all.
Alrighty. Unless I see your Q2, we'll come back to it. Bea 325 Q1. I am showing an ERD error with exits that happened in 2021 with exit code E155. And from May through June, then the student returned on August, and we had to do the N470 using the same day. Now, if I recall correctly, the N470 can only be used if the student has never attended that school before, and if they were pre-enrolled and didn't show up, then they have to be exited as 410 or the 140 rather. Is that what I remember, Brandy? The N470 is restricted unless they have never been to that school before. Yeah, so they have to have if they were pre-enrolled at an E150 from the prior year.
Right.
Okay. Or can they go back and change the E to T160 or something?
They went there. I mean, so the bottom line is you have to find out what happened to the student. The student didn't return. They were expected to return. You owned them before. It is not appropriate to no show. Right? So if you find out that they went to a private school or they moved out of state or out of the country, then you can go back and change the E155 to something else. Otherwise, if they were enrolled the subsequent year and you could not find them anywhere, once that investigation has been completed, then you can exit them within.
All righty. Thank you. I appreciate the clarity on that. I couldn't remember. All right, moving on to Sean at 327 Q1. Did I hear correctly? Apologies in advance if I didn't. Did Paul state that we are not to clear the ERDs, E140, E400 for students that were indeed located in CALPADS from the 21-22 to 22-23 school year? If so, how are we to maintain the anomaly percentages? ERDs are not counted in your anomaly percentages, only MIDs and CCEs. So ERDs do not actually count in that 2% against you for anomalies in fall one. Okay, Nettie responded with warnings or the errors that they were getting were CERT 106 and CERT 143, which are both warnings. So you can LEA approve / certify with warnings in place, so long as you have reviewed the data and it's true and correct to the best of your knowledge and meets. Like the CERT 143 happens a lot when you adopt a prior LEA's most recent SPED data to bring them into the student and do what you're supposed to do. Because by definition, if you're bringing in a prior LEA's SPED data, that happened outside of your enrollment window. So when you adopt it as your own, that SPED meeting date is not yours. So the CERT 143 is going to trigger saying, hey, why do you got SPED data that's not in your enrollment window? And so long as you can look back and say, oh, because it was a transferring student with disabilities and I adopted their most recent annual meeting, why do you ask? It's perfectly fine to have that. So, all right, moving on. Mary Masters, 3:30, Q1. Did anyone already ask about the DC list? Memo stating to pull the report after April 21st. I see a report on CalPADS homepage dated 4/20. Is this a bad version? Sorry, I was late getting in. Now, what happened with the direct cert this month was we sent it off on time on the 3rd, and it got returned to us twice with faulty headers or data or something in it. I don't recall, and I didn't pursue it. So the 420 message was posted with an exuberance of hope, and it turned out wrong. So they had to regenerate the list and send it back to CDSS for immediate processing. And the file that was sent off is dated 4/13, not 4/3. So when it was returned on 4/21, you can pull it, but the date on the file doesn't say 4/3 anymore. It says 4/13. So I have not pulled a DC extract today to confirm how it's displayed, but my understanding is the data was as of 4/13, and it was matched at CDSS and returned and posted on 4/21.
That's correct, Paul. Do you know what memo Mary is referring to?
No, I don't.
Neither.
But that's not uncommon for me. I don't know what memos are circulating most of the time. All right, moving on to Evan at 3:31, Q1, related to Cedric's earlier question regarding the ELS correction. We received an inquiry from an LEA who had a student with a prior enrollment returning after 2 years at another LEA. The LEA with the original enrollment had an HLS that led them to give the student an English-only status. The district with the subsequent enrollment found evidence of language other than English and had an ELAS of TBD than EL. How is this subsequent correction made if it didn't occur within the same school year?
Bottom line is that a student has a right to service, right? So let's say they're at an LEA, that LEA lists them as English only. Go to another LEA and they found evidence that the student needed to be tested. It's the student's right to service. So it does not matter whether or not it's within the same year. Even 2 years after they get there, someone can say, no, this kid should have been tested, but they weren't.
Is there, and just for my own edification, Brandy, is there a time limit on that window for them to test, or could
No.
the student have come in kindergarten, wrote an EO all the way through 11th grade, and in 12th grade is determined to be?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Because it's their right. So the time limit on corrections has to do with students who are tested, and then a correction has to be made to that. And that window is, so for example, I take the initial LPAC, and I was administered the test erroneously. But so I want to make a correction because the student actually isn't EL, they're EO, for example. That correction has to be made before the student's first administration of the summative assessment. But the correction reason that we're talking about here is something where the student is English only, but a district is able to capture evidence that they actually needed to be tested. And there is no timing.
Gotcha. Okie dokie. Melissa, 3:23, I see your Q2. I will return to it. Kim at 3:36, Q1. I appreciate your I appreciate your answers when I submit a help desk question. Thank you, Kyron, for your answers today regarding the CELPA cert page documentation. I want to hit reply and say thank you, but feel like it would be adding to your already overflowing queue. So big question here. You want us to reply with the thanks, or is that too much of a hassle? Tim, we love hearing from everybody when they appreciate our answer, because we hear from them when they don't. So if you wanted to say thank you, feel free. You would definitely make our day.
There's just one scenario where I think, at least personally, you shouldn't be replying at when we say the ticket has been closed or the defect has been resolved. Because if you reply to that, the problem gets reactivated and it's hard to track what is the known issue on our report.
Good point. Good point.
I have to say, I think that's the sweetest question we've gotten in a long time.
I would agree with that. Let's see, some Mary Masters or something, Lou, Nutrition. Lalani, 339 Q1. We add the completion status of 480 promoted to our 6th and 8th graders for the end of the year. Our schools are testing until the end of May and school ends on 6/1. Do I need to wait to mass add that information till after we are completely done with testing? Yes. Do not start exiting students in the middle of testing. You will hate yourself and your testing coordinator will come at you looking for blood. Don't do that. So yeah, it's that matriculated coding works perfectly when they've finished the highest grade at that school and they're moving on to the junior high or the high school. But just don't do it until after the testing is complete. All right, that's the end of our first run through. So let's go back up and start hitting the Q2s. And then we will see if there's anything else at the bottom. All right, so first Q2, Javier 319. If a student is assessed for special ed and did not qualify and did not enroll or attend school, grade is PS or younger, do we need to report these assessments? And if so, should we create an enrollment with a start and end date on the same day of the meeting/assessment for CalPADS to accept the transaction from SACE? A qualified, yes or younger. Okay, thank you, Alex. Alex has pulled up the, thank you, Flash 161 with the exiting students with disabilities. So if they did not enrolled in a school within the LEA and not eligible, and your enrollment record exited one day before. So yeah, you would create the N470 record. And I think that you can, I guess I'm confused as to why we're specifying one day before when the N470 takes both, but
Yeah.
I don't know if we were individually coding that to do an analysis later, and that was just the nuance, but
I think that's just the preference from DRO. Andy likes it a day before and did it like that. I don't know, but yes, you're right. CalPADS will accept both, either the same day as the enrollment start date or a day before. But one
And-
thing
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to point out, and for this is where the enrollment and the special ed person have to coordinate, because you can't no-show before you submit the SPED record, otherwise you get a GER5 error. So you first need to have an open enrollment, send up the 900 plan type that says do not qualify, and then no-show the record.
And the meeting date does not need to be the same as the enrollment date.
Correct.
You could have them as the same date, it doesn't matter. All right.
Our guide typically is that the enrollment start date should equal the parental consent date. But we're not going to validate for that, so it could be the meeting date.
Perfect. All right, moving on to Melissa's Q2 323. My SPED team is working on their monitoring, and they are going to need me to extract CalPADS files and upload them to the system improvement leads. Have you heard about this? If so, do you have any recommendations or documentation? It looks like Susan from Lodi provided some information there. And Melissa then responded with, I just don't know what exactly I'm supposed to extract from CalPADS and which date ranges to use, or which date range to use. Randy?
Yeah, so those are questions that you need to talk with your FOMTA monitoring consultants, because I believe those are part of your CIM or compliance improvement monitoring process. And if you go to our website, there's a web page for intensive level one. So Alex is showing you your FOMTA consultants here. So that's the first, probably best place to consult with your consultants first, right? And then if you go to the right pane there, Alex, you could type in CIM or intensive level 1, and it would actually show you the page relating to your CIM or intensive level 1. Yeah, there you go. You could use that first one. I bet that would actually show up yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, this is one of those. I mean, there's 3 steps for CIM. So, but the main point here, if you look at the page here, is first, that FOMTA consultant by region, check that out first. You have to go through certain levels of process here, as you could tell. So it's quite intensive. So you might want to just double check, closely coordinate with your FOMTA consultants. And there's several information regarding your CIM here. Please do check this webpage. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. All right. Scrolling down, Q2 at 344. Can you please show the slide about SENR, SPRG, end dates, and CASP testing so I can take a screenshot of it? Okay. And Shanna thought that looking for blood was a funny phrase. All right, and Azia is taking her screen capture, and we are now at the bottom, but we have, 13 minutes left. So we can either call it and give you 13 minutes of your life back, or we can continue talking. Sean, very good.
On the call have been forwarding me the nutritional services memo that Mary was asking about. So thank you, folks. I got that. So I think it's just worded kind of awkwardly. It says, say exactly, please pull the CalPADS report after April 21st, 2023. And all that means is if you had pulled it on the 20th, you might have gotten a bad file. And so they're just saying, make sure you request it again after the 20th because the data is correct now. So if you're going to use the date field in CalPADS, it's fine to use April 1st. So to get all of April, I think everybody in there is going to be April 13th, but doesn't mean you have to use a directly certified after April 21st. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Angela. Memo, anything that the service desk needs to be aware of, or?
I'll forward it. It's already kind of old news now, but
okay.
But I'll send it to you guys.
All right. Sean Walker, Q2 at 347, follow up to Q1 at 327. Per the data guide, if an E140 is populated, then, quote, the school, however, should conduct a full investigation to locate the student, and if the student cannot be found, should exit the student with an E140, no known exit truant. Bullet point, if the school receives proper documentation that the student is now attending a private school or moved out of state, the pre-enrollment can be deleted and the exit reason should be updated appropriately. If the school finds the student is transferred to another California public school, the pre-enrollment can be deleted. The E1 may remain because CalPADS will treat the exit as a transfer. This slightly contradicts what Paul said for updating. Should we go by this guidance still? I think that we're looking at things just slightly nuanced, because this is saying if you have the pre-enrollment sitting out there and so you're not allowed to do the N470, then you can go back and revisit. But if you assign that E140 and, it's 140, and, then you find stuff later on, a year down the road that, oh, look at that, the student did transfer out of state. You still conducted all of the investigations. So CDE wants to know about it. And since you're not having to recode pre-enrollment, there's nothing really to go back and change. That E140 should stick because you did the work and that student didn't return. So you went out and looked for him, and then you said, well, hell, I can't find him. But we did our work. We did our due diligence. So you then exited him as an E140, and that documentation should be in the student's CUME file somewhere to support that E140. So then if you go back and you go, oh, just kidding, and call it a T200, now you got all this truancy documentation floating around in their CUME file that's unsupported by any coding in CALPADS. So Brandy, do you want to justify this better for CDE? Because I'm just speaking from my position. Obviously, you have a different perspective.
I think Brandy had to leave us.
Okay, fine. Does anybody else want to try and explain that differently?
I think you said it well, Paul, and it is somewhat nuanced. I mean, bottom line, if the student was truant and you did the SARB and you did all those things, you can leave that in CalPADS as is. Some people just but I'm getting a error or ERD. They've re-entered and they're attending somewhere. So really, they weren't but at the time they were a truant, and it took them a long time before they got another enrollment. So it's a lot of busy work to go back and change it all. And CalPADS can recognize that, yes, at one point you did have them, and yes, they now have re-enrolled. And if somebody wanted to query that, they could find, how many kids were marked as truant, and then 2 years later or a year later they re-enrolled. But that's not something you guys have to worry about updating CalPADS for. So we prefer just, if you SARB, just leave it as the E140.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha. Azia 351 has a Q3. She wants us to go over the do not pre-populate SPRG end dates bullet point. The wording is a bit confusing. So let's see. All right. Demo testing. Do not pre-populate SPRG end dates in CalPADS that are used testing if students who have not completed testing yet. This will avoid any potential problems with testing. Okay. So if you have a program record open, 181, 192, any of them that are out there, don't pre-populate it as they start on August 15th. Don't put an end date of June 13th, because that's when we're going to end school. If the record is not open, the CalPADS extract over to CASP and LPAC may not include that information because it is not an open record. And a lot of the coding that goes in behind the scenes is looking for the open record. And yes, it's open on that date because it's included in that time span, but because you have corked the end of it, CalPADS recognizes it as a closed record, even though it's open on that date, spanning that window. If it's pre-populated, it can be interpreted as a closed record and will not be included in the extract. So it's more of a cautionary tale because we've seen it happen. Just don't do it, because the extract can pull it or it might not. So to make sure that it does get pulled, don't pre-populate an end date because you can't tell the future. So, I've always told my LEAs that, don't pre-populate end dates on stuff that hasn't happened yet. Oh, we're going to exit them out in May 31st. Well, the student left January, and then you didn't go back and change it, and now you got a real problem. But anyway, Let's see. Carolyn at 351, looks like you've been taken care of. They've given you multiple copies of the Cert 132. So, and Alex even gave you Cert 134 or Cert CalPads Flash 134 too. So there you go. Let's see. Doug 353, comment to add. The data guide documentation is a guideline, but as time goes by, the data should reflect what happened within the school year and or the period. Great. And Martha just responded to you, Sean, saying, we will look into correcting the data guide. I think CalPads Flash 132 has the current guidance that supersedes the data guide. So, and with that, we are down to 3:55. So I'm going to call it. You all have a great week. I appreciate you being here. This was, I had a very good time today. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. And if you have a problem between now and the next Q&A, please open a CalPad service desk ticket so we can address it as quickly as possible. And you all have a great week.
Oh, good job. I got it from here, guys.